What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Coleman, here with my wonderful co-host, EJ Schneider. And it's that time. We are finally in our last division of our, seemingly 2.5 month long draft recap series, where we're going through every single pick that was made in the 2020 NFL Draft division by division. We're wrapping it up today with the NFC West. Certainly some, let's just say, interesting classes. Always the Seattle Seahawks seemingly entertaining us on draft night by doing things that nobody saw coming. And they kept with the tradition this year. But before we get to them, they're going to be the first team we talk about. EJ, how are you feeling tonight?
I am doing well. This is the end of a very long March, but we're pretty excited about it. I wanted to thank all the NFC West fans for their patience and their diligence. We put out a podcast earlier in the week about Patrick Mahomes, and we heard from the NFC West fans who said, "Where's my draft recap?" Which, is pretty cool. Some people might think that's annoying, but hey, I just think that means they're listening and waiting and excited about it like we are. So we're here to deliver. We're here to give it to you in some good classes, some really interesting athletes, some fun matchups. It's a strong finish. It's not a limp to the finish, and I can't wait to get into it. It's a very competitive division and added a lot of talent. So yeah, I'm feeling good. What am I drinking? I am drinking limoncello seltzer this evening. For those of you that didn't listen to the last draft recap, taking a little bit of a break from drinking because I have this feeling the season might load up my limit on that. And,
you're a Bears fan. It's tradition.
That's right. Sometime you got to just tap the dashboard, do the check liver light. And anyways, so I'm drinking some bubbly flavored water and pretending it's more tasty bubbly flavored beer water, but it ain't. And it is what it is. What do you have to drink tonight?
So I put this out on Twitter. I was kind of experimenting earlier in the day because I wanted to see if this would work before I made it for the show. And spoiler alert, it totally works. It's really good. I had a cocktail right before COVID kind of ruined the world, and it's called a Smoke It If You Got It. And so I was kind of trying to recreate it today using stuff that I had. And it is amazing. I think it's more of a winter cocktail than a summer cocktail, but if you really like the taste of coffee and rye whiskey and scotch and a little bit of maple and black walnut, all these kind of like fall wintry flavors, and you're willing to drink them in summer, it's great. It's 1.5 ounces of rye, about a 1/2 ounce of Lefroy 10-year to give it a little smokiness, a little bar spoon of maple syrup. You can go lighter on the maple syrup if you don't like it to be as sweet, and then 3 dashes of black walnut bitters, which you should be able to find at like Bevmo or Total Wine or something like that. Most beverage stores carry those. Great bitters. And then what you do is you make some coffee and then you freeze it in ice cubes and you stir it over 3 coffee ice cubes. And so you get the rye, you get the smoke, you get the maple, the walnut, the coffee all together, and it is so damn good. I love this drink. I'm going to keep kind of playing with it, see if I could figure out maybe some better ratios. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how much maple syrup to put in there, but damn, this is good. I really, really like it.
I all of a sudden feel wholly inadequate with a seltzer because that sounds freaking great. I need to check, though, what kind of maple syrup are you using?
Real Canadian maple syrup.
Okay.
All right. I don't do the fake stuff.
I'll allow you. Yeah.
I'll
allow it.
You Pacific Northwesterners get all uppity about your maple syrup up there.
Well, actually, it's us Northeasterners, having been born in upstate New York. We made our own maple syrup, actually, and I'm lucky enough to have a mother-in-law that still ships me Vermont maple syrup. So just wanted to make sure you weren't doing the gummy garbage that people call maple syrup.
No. God,
okay, cool.
Speaking of gummy garbage, by the way, so the first 3 rounds of the Seahawks draft, we need to talk about this.
And we will.
I know that's not the brightest segue, and Seahawks fans might not appreciate that. I'll preface it with this. We loved everything that happened, like round 4 and later. Maybe I'll even give you round 3. Damian Lewis is kind of on the fringe for me. Starting your draft in the top 50, you got 2 top 50 picks, and you pass on really a lot of linebackers that we liked better than Jordan Brooks to take Jordan Brooks.
All of them? Right?
Including Patrick Queen, who went 1 pick later, and Lord knows how much we love Patrick Queen. and then you take Darrell Taylor when there's also a million edges on the board that we like better. I understand, John Schneider's going to do what John Schneider's going to do. But that doesn't mean that I don't get to ask, what the hell?
Yeah,
2.5 months later, I still don't get it.
Yeah, let's take them one at a time. The Jordan Brooks pick, I think, probably is the pick that looks the better of the two. And hear me out. I know it's at 27, and I know draft value-wise, he could have been had much later. I haven't heard any arguments that, some teams in the bottom of the first round were after Jordan Brooks, like you typically do, like the Bears with Cole Kmet, right? And I said, hey, they probably could have taken him at 50, and people were like, oh no, he would have been off the board. And I'm like, I'm not so sure, but that sounds more reasonable to me than Jordan Brooks was going at the end of the first. Nobody was saying that kind of ever. Jordan Brooks, a really good athletic linebacker out of Texas Tech, some very nice coverage skills. The positives, good range, good coverage skills. He can run and cover, and there are spots in this league, especially in the current offensive mindset, for linebackers that can run and cover. Corey Littleton went undrafted. Let that sink in for a minute. Corey Littleton, formerly of the Rams, now of the Raiders, just signed a big free agent contract, and with good reason. He's a great linebacker, and his strength is moving in coverage. Brooks has some of that in his game. Am I saying he's Corey Littleton or worth the same amount? I'm not. I'm saying that capacity, that ability is coveted in today's NFL. So, the Seahawks wanted it. They went and got it. John Schneider is always going to march to the tune of his own drummer and let the chips fall where they may. He doesn't care that Jordan Brooks is always going to be compared to Patrick Queen. He could care less. We talked about this during the live stream. That is not a thing that ever crosses John Schneider's mind. I'm excited to see him play. I can't come in and say, oh, yeah, that's the guy I would have taken. Great value, great choice, great fit. Scheme fit match, yeah, value. It's tough to defend. But again, Schneider doesn't care about that. Now, Darrell Taylor, this is the one I like a little bit less. I know Seattle needs extra pressure off the edge. They're not sure whether or not they're going to offer to Jadeveon Clowney. But Taylor was one of the guys on tape that didn't really wow me. I just couldn't find that one thing that he did really well all the time. And when I'm looking at edge players, I want them to have one sort of dominant skill that I can really lean on and build up the others.
I felt like he was a good run defender. Maybe.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. But again, I'm not going to draft a guy at 48 who's a good run defender. Like, that's not. And the other thing is, we talk about stables in running backs or stables in wide receivers all the time and getting a balance of skills. Seattle's not short on run defense, right?
Yeah.
They got Jaron Reed. Those guys are stout. They need some pop. They need some flash off the edge. And look, he's a player versus the run, but like I said, the Hawks already have those. He's got really solid leverage and extension. And I wrote down eater, not a playmaker in my notes. That's not what I want to pick at 48. He's a big guy. He's got decent pop in his hands. He doesn't have a lot of inside rush. And he's one of those guys, and there were a lot of these edges in the draft, so it's not just on him, who doesn't put it all together to create edge pressure very often. I wrote that he has tools but needs a plan.
He does not rush with a plan at all.
He does not rush with a plan, and he doesn't even hook the skills he has together very often. Occasionally he does, but you've got to look through a lot of tape to find that. And again, at 48, that doesn't feel like a value to me. Felt a little bit early. And the other thing is the Hawks' record with this position gives me pause, right? They took LJ Collier last year. He did almost nothing. They haven't been great at selecting kind of poppy edge players, and that makes me a little more hesitant about the Taylor pick. They've been pretty good with linebackers. Obviously, they've been very good with corners on defense. They've been very good with interior defensive linemen, like Jaron Reed. Great pick, right? But the edge, some teams just don't do great or do great very often picking certain positions, and this falls into that category. So I've got a little more hesitation on Taylor than I do on Brooks.
They're honestly better at bringing in edges as free agents.
Agreed.
Michael Bennett. Like, I guess in terms of ones that they drafted, Bruce Irvin's probably the best one that John Schneider's drafted, and that's Bruce Irvin. But Michael Bennett, free agent, Jadeveon Clowney, they traded for.
Yeah.
And may or may not bring him back as a free agent. You go back to like the 2012, 2013 teams, like Red Bryant, who played defensive end for them, is kind of like a hybrid guy. But even then, he was still really, really effective for what he was as basically like a base end for them. And then they would bring in Cliff Averill, and they would kind of, move Bryant inside sometimes. They'd move Bennett inside sometimes, then bring in Cliff Averill, who, again, was also a free agent. Like, they've had a lot more success. I think Chris Clemens, if I remember correctly, was also a free agent too, right? From those 2012, 2013 teams. So, they've had a lot more success at edge bringing in guys that they already know could play, because for whatever reason, they're just not great at drafting them. I'm with you on Darrell Taylor. Great against the run. He's got tools. He's got a good first step. He's got length. He just doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Like, you look at some of the tackles he's going up against in the SEC, and he's going to face even better tackles than that. In the pros, especially in that division. McGlinchey's going to have to go against. Josh Jones from Houston, I think he's going to have to go against, assuming he wins the right tackle job in Arizona. They're going to eat him alive because he doesn't rush with a plan, and he is so damn easy to read. You watch him going against Jedrick Wills, and Wills, he had his number because he was giving away everything he was going to do just from alignment and stance. And it's like, bro, like you're doing nothing to disguise. Like, I'm using this move and only that move, so see if you can stop it. And then any tackle in the SEC with any modicum of talent was able to stop it because he was so easy to read. Like, he's not developed at all yet. Like, there's some tools there.
You want to know what's worse?
What?
He really struggles against tight ends.
Oh yeah, the one that San Francisco drafted that we're going to talk, Charlie Warner.
Yeah,
kicked his ass.
I know.
It killed him.
That should give fans in the NFC West a pause, right? Because there's a really good tight end down the road, and he's gonna eat Darrell Taylor's lunch.
Yeah, twice a year.
He's absolutely gonna stymie Darrell Taylor, and I'm not talking about on chip blocks. I'm talking about straight up one-on-one. Taylor struggled to get around mobile tight ends who had any sense of leverage, and they really gave him fits. I wrote it in my notes that I was like, he has a tough time against tackles, but man, against tight ends, he gets almost nothing, and that's when you want to see especially a bigger sort of power-based edge really eat, and he got stuffed, and that does not portend well for a division that has some decent tight ends who can block. So
yeah, the 49ers alone have two tight ends that can beat them. So
yep.
I will say also on Jordan Brooks, if you're listening to this, go on YouTube and watch Samuel Gold's video on Jordan Brooks. Again, my complaints about that pick are not because of Brooks as a player. He's a good player. My complaint is that Patrick Queen and Logan Wilson were both available. And my grades on Patrick Queen and Logan Wilson, I think even Sam would agree with this, as much as Sam likes Brooks and as good a quality as Brooks has, his system fit and all that kind of stuff. Everything that he does well, both Queen and Wilson can also do, but do better. Like, that's my complaint. It's not that he's a bad pick. It's that there were better picks that could have been made, in my opinion. Now, Seahawks, their track record, like you said, with linebackers, they're pretty good. So I'm decently confident that Brooks is going to end up being a solid player for them. But I think they missed an opportunity to draft a superstar, and I think that's upsetting. Round 3, though, let's talk a little about Damian Lewis. In terms of that LSU offensive line, which is probably going to end up having 4 guys in the league over the next couple drafts, Lewis was, I would probably say maybe the second best. Obviously, Cushenberry, I think, was the best one. And Lewis, I felt, was fine. I think he has some power. I think he's good on combos, specifically with Cushenberry. I think that the communication we saw him at the Super Bowl was fine. Like, he's okay.
I wish we saw him at the Super Bowl.
Or Senior Bowl, excuse me. Senior Bowl.
Felt like the Super Bowl to us. Which,
yeah, I know, right? He was okay, but I think you saw him run into some trouble with guys like Derek Brown that got under him. he didn't really have the ability to then re-anchor. I mean, he got literally thrown into Joe Burrow for a sack by Derek Brown. Whereas Cushenberry, he was able to really dig that bubble butt in and re-anchor when Brown got under him. Lewis he doesn't have that kind of power. And he also doesn't have the kind of movement skills of some of the other guards in this class either. So he's kind of in this weird kind of in between where he's not super strong, he's not super quick, he's okay at everything, he's not bad at anything. Like, I think he's solid. I'm not sure if he's going to be starting as a rookie or even starting in his second year. I think you could do worse for a swing guard pick, but I wasn't like ecstatic with it.
Yeah, Lewis, the best thing Lewis had going was Cushenberry next to him. Because Cushenberry is amazing, and the two of them work extremely well together. They were late ads to the Senior Bowl, so they got there late for practice and immediately started just destroying folks in the double team drills. Because look, they've worked together for years at LSU. They understand what's going on, and they're both very good players. But Lewis, like you said, when he started to get exposed was in one-on-ones. In the 2-on-1 drills, he looked damn good. And everybody kind of went, oh, they're both really good. And the answer is Cushenberry is really good. Lewis is solid. He's okay. You remove Cushenberry from, Lewis's left and let him go one-on-one, and you go, oh, he's good. He's got some good power. He can anchor. He's not terribly long. He is strong. He's very experienced in the SEC. But he's not great. And again, he's not a super fluid mover. He's not a guy that I think is really going to get out in space and run over a safety. Not really his game. So he's solid. And we talked about the sort of, I don't want to say sweet spot, but the decent range for guards in this draft was really rounds 3 through 5. And there were a bunch of guys that you could sort of get in 3. There was a whole bunch of guys you could go after in 4. And then there were still going to be some of those guys that pushed down to round 5, and you could get a value if you're looking for that. In terms of that, it's right on the front cusp of that. He was picked, round 3, pick 69. And it's sort of the early edge or the leading edge of that guard bubble from this draft. And he is good. He's solid. I think he's safe, if you want to call it that. But he's not great. And there are guys that went behind him that I like better because they move a little better, or they have better range, or they're better one-on-one than he is. So he's a solid pick. And again, felt a little bit early, but John Schneider doesn't care about that. And I don't think he's going to look quite as good without Cushenberry next to him, because he's not going to have that in Seattle either. So he's good. He's solid. He might start. I don't see him like immediately coming in. He doesn't have that kind of talent where he's immediately going to come in and push somebody off the roster, take their spot. So I'm fine with it, but I'm just sort of fine with it. And then Seattle's draft turns a little bit.
Oh, God, it was so good after that. So good.
Yeah, they really killed the end of the draft. They went to one of our favorites, a guy that I introduced you to when I came down to your house pre-draft, Colby Parkinson, tight end from Stanford. Now, he broke his foot about a month ago while he was in Seattle working out, so we don't know how that's going to go. But pre-draft, Colby Parkinson was wildly underrated. He is a very tall guy. He runs like a wide receiver. He is certainly built like a tight end. And one of the reasons you didn't hear his name more is because his quarterback at Stanford, who is now Mike Leach's quarterback down in Mississippi, couldn't hit the broadside of a barn past 10 yards.
Yep.
He just can't. He left so many yards on the field. So Parkinson, who's not a, I would say, gifted route runner, but he's fine. He's solid as a route runner. It's his speed and his size that really makes him a matchup problem. And he's a decent route runner, good blocker. And, he would get open on a little double move down the seam, and the ball would be 5 yards away from him at 15 yards deep. And there were a lot of those plays. And I said, hey, man, look at this. He's getting hung out to dry left and right. I actually watched Parkinson one night after you went to bed. And then the next morning I was like, you got to look at this guy. He's really tall. He's really fast. Nobody's talking about him. He was consistently in sort of the early mock drafts, 6th round, maybe up to the 5th round, but typically 6th or 7th round, he was always there. And when I was doing mock drafts early in the process, I was always grabbing him in the 5th or the 6th, and that was a great value. Came around to draft time, people had sort of warmed up on Parkinson and realized there was more there. ends up going in the 4th round, pick 133, and getting added to a tight end room in Seattle where they need some consistency. They have some great players. Will Dissly has been a bright spot for them, but he got injured. So they feel like they need some more consistency, and of course he comes in and he breaks his foot. He gets injured. I don't know what it is with Seattle and tight ends. But if he stays healthy, he's going to give Russell a great red zone target. And really, I think between the 20s, he can do more than he did at Stanford again, because we talked about Damian Lewis not having Lloyd Cushenberry. Well, yep. Colby Parkinson didn't have Russell Wilson at Stanford. Let's put it that way. And now
he would have gone a hell of a lot higher.
He would have been a sort of 2nd or 3rd round talked about talent had he had anybody that was really even capable. So he's going to get a huge upgrade. And I think he can do more. So we like Parkinson a lot. I just think he's, You
know what he is? He's the guy. He got hurt, so I don't know if he'll be this as a rookie because foot injuries can be problematic. But maybe 2021, he'll be the guy that they hoped Jimmy Graham would have been when they signed him. Like he's, in terms of size, speed, ball skills, running that little out and up down the boundary that Russell can hit in his sleep, sluggo seam, all that kind of stuff where it's like, hey, we're trying to create a conflict with the safety down the field between you and DK. I'm going to throw a ball, super high up, just go make me right. Like that's what he can do. You just have to put it in his area. Unfortunately, that wasn't happening at Stanford, despite the fact he was friggin' 6'7". You'd think he'd be an easy target to hit, but apparently not. But Russell can do that. I think when he's healthy, when he heals up, when his foot's okay, he gets his movement skills back. A quarterback as accurate as Russell's going to be able to use his leverage to his advantage, just like he did with DK, and he's going to be a serious weapon. I can't wait to see that. DJ Dallas, I know, is another pick that you really like. DJ Dallas is one of your guys. It seems like Seattle just is overflowing with running backs at this point. I like the player. No idea how he's going to fit into the roster, though.
Well, they keep using him. That's the thing about Seattle is, you're right. They seemingly have a sort of endless rotation of guys that they plug in. Chris Carson is the guy that they really lean on the most, but man, do they lean on running backs. Like, if you want the closest thing to ground and pound, probably too much, it's the Hawks, right? Pete Carroll and John Schneider, too, love that game. They just love that game. And many fans in the Northwest and elsewhere have been clamoring for a long time, let Russell free. Russell is one of the best quarterbacks. And they always point to the game where his headset went out and he had to call, a quarter and a half of his own plays. And the Hawks went on a freaking tear. And they're like, why can we not do that more often? Like, he's really good at it. Let him go. They're, almost persistent to a fault. Almost stubborn to a fault with saying, no, we are going to pound the rock. And they do. And that uses up running backs. Like, Carson's been hurt. They hammer the ball a lot more than a lot of teams in this passing era. So, he's going to get some opportunity. And when he does, I think he's a guy that has a lot more than he was able to really show in a super lousy offense at Miami. He was stuck in a crappy offense at Miami. Very talented all-around runner. Good speed, catches well. A lot of willingness in pass protection. Could use a little technique upgrade, but I would rather have that combination than the other. Guy with really good technique who doesn't want it. DJ definitely wants it. And he can pick his way along in foul blocks. He's got some patience to his game as well. Occasionally breaks 3 tackles, and then, woohoo, it's showtime. So hopefully he won't have to do that in Seattle. He had to do that regularly in Miami if he wanted any yards, and a lot of times those tackles or tackle attempts were behind his line of scrimmage. So, he landed with a team that's committed to the run. I think he's got more skills than he showed in college. I think he was a good, solid value where they got him back into the 4th round. I'm excited to see what he can do. And again, if a guy like Chris Carson gets hurt, we could see DJ Dallas get quite a few carries in his first year.
I do think that maybe there were some other positions that they could have prioritized there that they definitely had holes at, but maybe they just really like Dallas that much. Again, not complaining about the talent. I just, I will never understand entirely why John Schneider makes some of the decisions he does and why he prioritizes certain things. But hey, whatever. He's won a Super Bowl and I haven't, so what do I know? I will say though, that his pick 1 round later with Alton Robinson, I know exactly what he was doing, and that was giving himself some insurance with Darrell Taylor, because I think Alton Robinson honestly could end up being a better pass rusher than Darrell Taylor, who they drafted 2 or 3 rounds earlier than that. Not super long, I thought he was going to measure longer than he did. He only came in at like 32.5-inch arms, so I was kind of like, whoa, where'd that come from? I was expecting like 6'4", 34 inches. Like he wasn't as tall or as long as I expected, but he was exactly as explosive as I expected for like a 265, 270 pounder, running 4.7, jumping 35 inches. Like that pop in his first step really showed up. And I think that's really going to be the building block for him. Again, he's another one of those guys who doesn't rush with a plan, but he's even more toolsy than Taylor. And I felt like he was a better playmaker than Taylor as well. I'm very curious to see how he develops in Seattle, because I truly believe, just based on watching them in college, like if you put him in a vacuum, I probably would have taken Alton Robinson ahead of Taylor anyway. So the fact that they got him so much later, I consider that an excellent value.
Yeah, this is a great spot for Alton. Now, he's one of those guys. I've followed Alton because I follow Syracuse a little bit. Again, I was born and raised in upstate New York for the most part. Syracuse, went to basketball camp at Syracuse. I've always followed the Orange. And Alton Robinson came in with a lot of fanfare. He was a high-star recruit, chose Syracuse over some other big schools, and just toolsy. This guy has all the superstar tools, and he had him in high school. We got to see him standing in the lobby in just a T-shirt and shorts at the Senior Bowl one night when the guys there are doing interviews and testing. They go late into the night, and we looked over and we're like, hey, man, that's Alton Robinson. He doesn't need pads, man. This guy has an ass you could set a drink on. He is built. He is superpower. And what I wrote for this is he is the perfect power end for the Seattle mold, right? That elephant guy that can set the edge. And he's flashy. He's flashier than Darrell Taylor. Now, the frustration at Syracuse, and hopefully not continuing on to Seattle, is he's got all this tools. He's got all this power. He does have a little first step flash to him. Why doesn't he get to the quarterback more often? And, Kendall Coleman, who was on the other end at Syracuse, got there almost as often and is a completely different player. And I would say overall not as skilled. So here's a guy with all the skills and all the physical tools. And again, he doesn't always put the plan together. In fact, he does it, I would say, a lot less than you'd hope he would. But there's just more there to work with than Darrell Taylor. And even if he doesn't develop like we hope he does, he's going to be that solid down-eating power end for them with a few flash plays every year that make you say, oh man, why can't he do that more often? Which would be exactly what he did at Syracuse. So great value, interesting player, and who knows if he takes to the coaching and something, everybody's been hoping for the last 4 or 5 years that the light would go on for him. And if the light goes on, again, he's got all those abilities. If he can hook them together more often, it's going to be a massive value. But even if he doesn't, he's going to be a very solid player for them.
Yeah, I love that value. And then to round it out, in round 6 and round 7, they picked up Freddie Swain, one of seemingly a friggin' million receivers coming out of Florida this year, and Stephon Sullivan, the kind of hybrid receiver tight end from LSU, who I guess you could say was their second tight end behind Thaddeus Moss, although they used him totally differently. But Sullivan's kind of like a move tight end for them. Personally, I'm not 100% sure. Like I'm upset for Swain because I felt like on a lot of other teams he would have got more snaps. I don't think he's going to get a whole lot of reps in front of DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, or Philip Dorsett even. I think that if anything, he'll be like number 3 at best, but I think he's a more talented guy than most number 3s. Like I could imagine him playing in the slot. I think he could play a little bit outside depending on how they want to use Lockett. Like I think he's a really, really solid pick for them in the 6th round to get a wide receiver that I think is going to at least challenge for that slot role early on, depending on what Dorsett does. But at worst, by 2021, I think he's going to play significant snaps. I think there's a lot of other teams he could have gone to play earlier, but considering that he's going to be with Russell, and then considering that, honestly, after this season, besides Metcalf and Lockett, I'm not sure what their contract situation is. Maybe David Moore expires. Maybe Dorsett expires. I think Dorsett only has 1 year. So maybe 2021, he'll have a better opportunity to get on the field. It's unfortunate that he won't be able to get on the field as much as I think he could have elsewhere in 2020, but really good player, really good value. And then Sullivan, to be honest, with Greg Olsen there, with Luke Wilson there if he's coming back healthy, with Parkinson there, like I don't imagine he would ever get on the field. And even then, I think there's a lot of things, and Disley too, I forgot him. And even then, everything that Sullivan does as a kind of classic undersized move tight end, I feel like a lot of other guys on the roster already do better too. So he's not somebody at least on this roster, I don't expect a whole lot from him. Potentially, maybe he goes to a practice squad. Maybe he gets picked up by another team that could really use his services. But I don't expect he's got a long-term future in Seattle just because of everybody else that's already on the depth chart. But it doesn't mean he's a bad player. Again, in a vacuum, both Swain and Sullivan, I really liked his picks. I just don't expect them to put up really any numbers at all as rookies.
Yeah, I don't think Swain puts up numbers as a rookie. I do think he probably gets some number 4 wide receiver snaps as a rookie. Florida had 2 other wide receivers who were actually both at the Senior Bowl, who were much more sort of widely heralded. And Swain was a guy that popped on tape while I was watching those guys versus Auburn. Now, Auburn had their entire secondary drafted into the NFL. And the guy that caught all the balls in that game all day long for huge gains was Freddie Swain. And I was like, who is this guy? And then I realized he was eligible this year as well. And I was like, oh, Florida has 3 wide receivers, not 2. He had 6 catches for 146 yards. That's 24.3 yards a catch and a touchdown in that game. And he just kept killing Auburn, like big catch after big catch. That's when Freddie Swain hit my radar. I don't think he's going to start anytime soon, just like you, but I bet Russell's going to like his game. And look, the Seahawks are really good at bringing in no-name wide receivers, quote-unquote no-name wide receivers, who they get down in the 5th and the 6th and the 7th and even undrafted. Doug Baldwin's undrafted. I'm not saying he's Doug Baldwin, but these guys come in and they start getting catches and earning spots, and then somebody moves on in a contract, and it's like, oh, that no-name wide receiver core. But, Russell loves those guys. And Freddie Swain, I think he's going to sort of warm up to Freddie's game. Stephon Sullivan, a guy we got glimpses of at the Senior Bowl, which is kind of good because LSU, he had, 12 catches for 130 yards, no TDs. He's only got 46 total catches in his career down in Baton Rouge. Big, rangy guy. Standing next to him on the field at the Senior Bowl after practice, I was like, man, he's tall. Sort of outgrew his wide receiver spot. And I just think it'd be really interesting if he were to make the roster. I think all the reasons he might not or make the practice squad that you cited are completely valid. But I would love, in a sort of fantasy world, to see inside-outside switch routes with him and Metcalf.
Ooh,
because they're similar frame-wise, right? Sullivan's 6'5", 242. Metcalf is 6'4", basically 230. Metcalf faster for sure in a straight line, 4.33. Sullivan was pretty fast. He was the second fastest tight end this year at 4.66, which isn't blazing, but it's good at that size. Again, 6'5", almost 250. And man, if you put them in a sort of, so line them up in a straight Y, slide him, motion him out to the slot, and then run a nice little cross sort of scissors route with Sullivan to the boundary and Metcalf going up the inside seam. Ooh.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm like,
good
two
luck
towers.
finding a safety that can deal with that much size deep down the field. That's tough to deal with.
That's my sort of best case fantasy scenario. The more likely case is, look, they have 4 tight ends that probably make the roster in front of them. I doubt they carry 5. I don't think Sullivan probably carries enough value on special teams to hold a roster spot. So I would say practice squad, but again, a guy that you're getting, deep down the board in the 7th round, pick 251, basically the very tail end of the draft. Sullivan's a good bet as any. So I love what they did from, 4th round on down. I think the first 3 rounds have the potential to work out, but work out in a Seattle way, which is hey, we didn't see that coming, but John Schneider picked 1 or 2 out of 3. If I had to bet on 2, I'd bet on Brooks and Lewis out of the top 3, but love the value for Parkinson, Dallas, Robinson, Swain, and Sullivan. So another interesting draft for Seattle, but we'll see how it plays out because, again, those guys have won a Super Bowl, and we're just sitting here talking about it. So,
yeah, speaking of Super Bowls, the next team we want to talk about in the NFC West just went to one and unfortunately got Mahomes at the last minute like so many other teams did.
It's a verb.
It's a verb. It happens. Trust me, as a Texans fan, I know it happens. Yeah. And it was interesting. I kind of felt it was a class. It was a small class, only 5 picks, but it was a class to me that was doubling down on what they are. It was, okay, we got to the Super Bowl doing this. Let's just keep doing that and do it even more. And so you look at Javon Kinlaw, who I actually put Javon Kinlaw in my mock draft to them because I was like, with the Buckner situation, I was like, it makes sense. Like, they can't pay everybody, and they need another interior defensive lineman that can come in and fill that role. Who at the time, I think, I can't remember if it was before or after the Buckner trade, but I was like, look, they can't pay Armstead and Buckner, and then you got also contracts with D Ford, and you're going to eventually have to pay Bosa in a few years. Like there's a lot of money that they really don't want to sink into one position group. So they get rid of Buckner, jettison him for a 1st-round pick, or at least another 1st-round pick. They get up into the 14th overall spot with Indy, and then they just pick basically the exact same player in Javon Kinlaw, but a guy who can give them that same value for infinitely cheaper. We're talking like a $3.5 million salary this year versus $20 million. So it's I personally love that value. Again, ultra strong, bull in a china shop kind of guy. I don't think his eye discipline is quite as good as Buckner. I don't think his hands are quite as quite as good as Buckner. Yet, but I think his physical talent is on par with Buckner, and I think he can get there, especially with the Niners coaching staff, who has proven themselves to be very good at developing interior defensive linemen. So within a couple years, if he hits his ceiling, like we're talking about another DeForest Buckner, another, Fletcher Cox kind of guy, just an absolute terror to deal with that can play anything from cocked nose all the way out to shit. You can put him at 5 tech. You can put him at 6 if you want to. I mean, he's athletic enough to even get some snaps rushing off the edge if you want to drop some weight. Like, he can do anything. Like, he's infinitely talented. So again, getting him at 14th overall, and saving yourself some money, I think was an excellent move. And then in the theme of doubling down, it's, hey, we drafted Deebo Samuel last year. Let's draft another guy that has a very similar skill set in terms of creating after the catch, getting the ball on sweeps, impacting special teams, but also having an extra gear over the top that I think Deebo doesn't have. He's like put like jet boots on Deebo Samuel and let's Brandon Ayuk. Like, it's same kind of guy. So those top 2 picks signal to me, like, look, we know what we are. Let's just do more of it and do it cheaper. And I love everything about these 2 1st-round picks.
Yeah, I don't think Kinlaw is Buckner because I think Buckner was more developed coming out, or more well-rounded. But that's not to say Kinlaw is a bad player. We got to see him at the Senior Bowl. We saw him on tape plenty. It gives San Francisco this really interesting option to just unleash is the best word I can think of on the interior defensive line. Mm-hmm. Kinlaw is a buzzsaw, and he will wreck things with grit, length, and power right now while he's figuring it out. Once he figures out consistent hand usage, guys like Armstead and DJ Jones start giving him leverage tricks, he has enough ability to be the best interior defensive lineman they have within 2 years. And that's saying something because the guys I just mentioned, DJ Jones and Armstead, are both really good interior defensive linemen. But Kinlaw's ceiling is staggering.
Limitless. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So physically talented, and he just comes on every snap. His move is go get him, right? And he's good at it. And that's going to be really interesting. In the meantime, while he's picking up all those things, because he's also very hungry to learn and improve. But even in the meantime, you can just say, go get him. And he can do that even against pro guards and pro centers. He's that good. So Ayuk, I think, is just made to be with Shanahan. His yak skills are what make him really intriguing. Like, he's fast. He's not huge. He plays pretty big. But he fights so hard with the ball in his hands. He is truly never say die. And in that scheme, it's going to produce some really big plays this year because we all know that Shanahan can scheme it open. He's good enough to catch it. He's got enough speed to sort of break it open. But when you combine that with this absolute unwillingness to go down, Ayuk's going to make some flashy plays. And did I hear that Debo got hurt?
Yeah, I think he also broke his foot, if I remember correctly. I think it was a foot injury.
Yeah, so Ayuk has got a sort of bigger window here in our whatever COVID football we're going to get to make a bigger splash. But and his return skills are just a bonus. He's got return chops. He's got return touchdowns in college. So, Ayuk is just one of those guys that Shanahan can make a lot of guys look good, running backs for sure, tight ends, even fullbacks. But he can scheme Ayuk open, and Ayuk's got some tools to really make defensive coordinators in the NFC West and elsewhere pretty nervous. So I like both of those first-round picks as well.
Here's the one thing, though, before we move on to McTivitt's with Ayuk.
Yeah.
Because I know as soon as Debo went down, everybody's like, oh, bet on Ayuk to be Rookie of the Year. Okay. Here, the Shanahan is good at getting people the ball when he absolutely wants them to have the ball. But here's the thing. In the normal 49ers offense, like I have a copy of Kyle Shanahan's 49ers playbook. It is not easy. The route tree at the beginning of the 3-step passing game install portion of this playbook is 24 pages long for the route tree. Okay, it's not easy. Like, there's a reason why they gave Debo the ball so many sweeps and, screens and all that kind of stuff.
Just get it into his hands.
Just get it into his hands because all these route tags and they had all these different, can calls that they have where it's in the West Coast system. I mean, you're spitting out so much language and then you go blah, 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 and you're spitting out even more language and you're trying to keep track of 2 play calls in your head and, all the motions. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot. And when you know it, it's easy. It's like another language. And you can understand it without even trying to think. But until you get to that point, again, that's why everywhere Kyle Shanahan goes, it takes a couple years because it takes time for players to understand the language, and then once they do, it's amazing. Look at Atlanta as an example. Didn't go so well year 1, year 2, they're going to the Super Bowl. Like it takes a while, and so don't expect Brandon Ayuk to walk in here and suddenly master this version of the West Coast offense because I don't know any rookie ever that has been able to do that.
Yeah, no, it's a very solid point that he's got great skills, and you'll probably see a lot of the Debo model, right? How can we get him the ball on more simplistic sets and just see what he can do with those wheels and that yak, and a little less down the field passing in terms of again moving him to multiple spots. That complicates it even further. Now you don't need to know one job, you need to know 2. So if they can keep him out of that and keep it simplistic, I think they can maximize some of his value in round 1. But I'm with you. I would not expect him to be league leaders just because he's not the only option in that offense either. Even with Debo down, they have a bunch of other options, and they're going to spread it around. So, yeah, I think that's a really salient point.
They didn't have another pick until literally 128 picks later.
Big
if you
gap.
can believe it. Huge gap. All the way down to round 5 was their next pick, and Colton McTivitt's. I did not watch him. Did you?
Yeah, McKivitz is one of those guys that didn't really stand out on tape. He seems solid. He reminds me a little bit of a guy we like in Charlie Heck, in that he has some skills. He didn't seem stunning. We've talked about it before that if you're a decent swing tackle in this league, you don't stay that way for long because it's hard to find decent starting tackles, and decent swing tackles become starting tackles. I could see McKivitz doing that after a while. they're pretty good at choosing tackles. We talked about Seattle and the positions that they're good at choosing. The Niners have done pretty well with their tackle selection, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on this one. Also, he's a 5th rounder. Again, there's this huge gap. It feels like, oh, he's the 3rd pick you're talking about. He was a 3rd rounder. Nope, he was a 5th rounder, way down at 153. Solid value at that point. They seem to know what they like and be able to develop them. So, again, benefit of the doubt. Maybe a swing tackle. He doesn't have great movement skills. He's got some decent mentors in the organization for sure. This isn't really a light the fireworks off pick or we have to pan it really hard. It's a 5th round tackle who can probably work his way into the rotation. That's not bad. I don't know what else to say about Colton McKivitz.
Well, what is a light the fireworks off kind of pick? For Kyle Shanahan, at least for this offense, Charlie frickin' Warner. And I know there's a lot of people out here going, what? Why are you guys excited by a blocking tight end from Georgia when they already have George Kittle? It's like, no, you guys don't understand. This dude's going to be a monster in this offense solely for his blocking ability.
Yeah, this is another guy I turned you on to at Georgia, and it was watching pass rushers, and I sort of put it together. You don't always watch. Certainly, you don't always watch the same opposing offenses. Just variety of tape and what's available and whatever else. And over the course of a couple of weeks and watching pass rushers, I ended up watching pass rushers against the Georgia offense about 3 or 4 times. And I realized that in my 3rd game against the Georgia offense with a different pass rusher that I was writing, this guy struggles against tight ends. And then I went, wait, didn't I write that? And so I had to look back, and sometimes you just sort of connect these threads. And I had to look back and say, yeah, I wrote that about this guy, and I wrote that about this guy. Who the hell's the tight end from Georgia? Right? And I went back and I found his number and I looked him up, and I'll be damned if he's not draft eligible. And it was about 2 weeks before the combine. And I was really hoping that Charlie Werner was going to get invited to the combine. Now, again, as a non-flashy tight end in an SEC offense that didn't have hardly any passing yards, I thought he might not, but as luck would have it, Werner gets invited to the combine. I end up watching the combine for a couple of different reasons, but one is to see if players who didn't do things in college might be able to do some of those things in the pros, and I want to see how Charlie Werner moves because I know he can block the hell out of people. I know he's really, really good, technically sound at that, and very effective. I want to see if he can run. I want to see if he can move his hips. I want to see if he can adjust to the ball in the air. And you get to see all those things in a controlled setting, but you get to see the basic building blocks at the combine. And sure enough, Charlie Werner can move. He's a pretty good athlete. He's not silky smooth, but he is not clunky. He is coordinated. He's fairly quick, and Werner's a guy that can move, and that's one of those things that I pull out of the combine and go, here's a guy that can block the hell out of some of the best pass rushers that this class has to offer, and he can move. And then he ends up going to San Francisco, where there is no better place in the league because nobody else understands how to use that position the way that Shanahan does. And by that position, I mean guys that can block, move, and catch. And they have Juszczyk and they have Kittle, and now they've got Werner. And if you put Werner and Kittle and Juszczyk in the same formation down by the goal line, they will walk in on 40% of their attempts. They will walk in like untouched. Like that is a blocking trio for the gods. For anybody that likes blocking, those 3 would be really hard to deal with. And if he starts doing Shanahan things and moving him around and putting him in stacks and motioning Juszczyk to one side and having, Kittle and Werner stacked on the other side, God help you. You are in deep, deep trouble because just such a great fit. So that's why we're excited about some blocking tight end from Georgia, because he's pretty damn good and he can probably do more than he did at Georgia.
Raheem Mostert just asked for a trade yesterday, and I'm like, bro, are you sure?
No, we talked about this.
It's free stats.
We talked about this, and you opened the can, so I'm going to talk about it now because, A, nobody should be surprised. Why? Who's Kyle Shanahan's dad?
Mike Shanahan.
And what did Mike Shanahan do with his running game? Year after year after year after year.
Turn nobodies into all pros.
That's right. He cranked 1,000 yards out of whoever he threw in the spot. And if that person went, hey, man, I got 1,000 yards. I'm pretty good. Guess what he did?
Got rid of him and got another one.
He got rid of him. And this is well before that was the en vogue thing to do. Backfields by committee were not favored. Like, you wanted your bell cow back. We were talking about 25 carries a game was not uncommon in that era. And still, Mike Shanahan was like, oh, yeah, I got another one. All I need is the following skills. Bam, bam, bam. And why are we surprised that his kid is exactly the same way? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, in our UDFA episode, which folks can go back on the YouTube channel and find, when we talked about gems out of the UDFA class, we talked about guys with pop, 2 of them going as UDFAs to San Francisco because they have the skills that Shanahan needs. They're fast enough and they're good one-cut runners, right? I think one of them is Jermichael Hasty out of Baylor.
Yep, and then Salvin Ahmed.
Yep, Salvin Ahmed out of UW, right? So he's got 2 guys that look a lot like Raheem Mostert. Remember, Raheem Mostert was on which team? He was on like his 7th team or something, unless I'm mistaken. Yeah. And Raheem Mostert, the only reason that I saw his agent, and look, this is his agent's job. I'm not begrudging his agent. His agent comes out and goes, well, this is really disappointing for a guy that put the team on his back and, took all these yards and got him to the Super Bowl. And I'm like, You're
got them to the Super Bowl.
You're lacking a little context in that quote. I get it that it's your job to pump up your client, and good for you. But look, it's not that Shanahan's going to go out and reload. He already reloaded. Your leverage was slight, and now it's gone. And you're not going to do as well anywhere else. So, A, don't be surprised that Shanahan did this. He's just following in his dad's footsteps. B, he doesn't have to go find anybody. He's already got them, and he got them for nothing.
Yeah.
And they're going to do just as well.
He already still has Tevin Coleman. He still has Jerick McKinnon, assuming Jerick McKinnon is still alive at this point. I can't tell anymore. And then obviously Jermichael Hasty and Salvin Ahmed, like, they're fine. Yeah. And Jeff Wilson's there too. Like, they're fine. They don't need Raheem Mostert. And Raheem Mostert played really well. He's a good player. But they don't need him. And so asking for a trade, it's like, dude, are you sure? Because when you're in 22 personnel with Kittle and Warner and Juszczyk blocking their asses off for you, and you're getting 80-yard touchdowns for free,
that's not going to show up elsewhere. So
I'd stick with that.
Yeah, this is a case of sort of ego and, quite frankly, positional value, right? Running back is fungible, right? It is the most fungible position in the NFL. You can go get them. You can get them for cheap. You can get them for UDFAs. If you're good at identifying 1 or 2 qualities that are going to make somebody work in your system, you can keep cycling through them for very cheap. Now, great running backs, we've talked about it. Difference makers, sure, draft them high, pay them again that very affordable rookie wage scale, and then go get another one. If that's what you want to do, great. But if you're like Kyle Shanahan and you can scheme the run game better than pretty much anybody in the NFL right now, I'd say that's a fairly fair statement. And you know that you need guys that have good one-cut ability, decent vision, and a ton of speed to crack that thing wide open once they make the cut. Those guys are available. You can go get them for nothing. He just got 2 in UDFA. So, it's a bit of a misstep by Mostert, and I don't think he's going to find greener pastures elsewhere. So it's kind of unfortunate, but it's the junction of positional value and the ability to find people, on the street that make it so you just say, I'm not going to give you a new contract. Like yeah. I don't need to.
Yeah. Before we get too long in this, so here's the current receiver depth chart. We'll talk about Juwan Jennings a little bit, 7th round pick. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Hurd, Dante Pettis, Richie James, Trent Taylor. Could we just agree Juwan Jennings is a practice squad guy? No matter what.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe he's a practice squad guy. I hope for his sake he's a practice squad guy. That's a tough lineup to crack. While it may not be the A-list superstars, a lot of those guys have, again, 1 or 2 skills that Shanahan really wants, and he's got a very particular play in mind to get them the ball. Juwan Jennings, if he was to make the roster, which I do not think he will make the 53-man roster, man, Juwan Jennings and Jalen Hurd in the red zone.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you're drafting him for inside the 20s, and that's it.
6'3" and 6'5", and then put Kittle, Juszczyk, and whoever else you'd like to put in there for some run blocking nightmare. Add Werner to the mix, like we talked about. Like, good luck. Juwan Jennings is a big dude. Jalen Hurd's a very big dude. So it would be fun. Much like I talked about Stephon Sullivan, it would be fun. I don't expect to see it anytime soon with that kind of receiver depth in front of him. He's a big guy. He's got some skills. I don't see him immediately displacing anybody but maybe the bottom guy in the list that you just put out there. And again, once Deebo Samuel gets healthy, he would be right back to the practice squad if he makes it there. So I think that's probably his best case scenario.
Yeah, so overall, again, small class, but very, very solid class, especially with Kinlaw, Ayuk, and Werner. I mean, that's three guys that are going to be immediate contributors in one way or another. McKivitz could be a swing tackle down the line, and Juwan Jennings, we'll wait
card,
and see.
wild card,
late
round wild card.
It's a Super Bowl team that got better. What more could you ask for? Moving on to the Rams, in typical Rams fashion, we got a boatload of picks here. Les Snead, wheeling and dealing, which seems to be a theme with him. I mean, he's always looking to make a deal. Always looking to get rid of his first-round picks, too. He's another one of those general managers that would kind of seemingly follow in that trend of the last few years of, I'm going to spend my first-round draft capital on a player that I already know is good. So they used that first-rounder on Jalen Ramsey, which is how the Jaguars got their extra first-round pick in this draft. So they started out in round 2 with pick 52 with Cam Akers. I mean, I guess you can consider Jalen Ramsey the first-round pick, so we can give him positive marks for that. But round 2, you get Cam Akers, a wonderfully talented running back out of Florida State. Van Jefferson, also in round 2, about 5 picks later, who was a star at the Senior Bowl, and both made us, look at from the bleachers going, who the hell is that? Oh, it's Van Jefferson, the receiver coach's kid. Okay, yeah, makes sense. Round 3, Terrell Lewis, another guy who we're looking at from the bleachers in the Senior Bowl, going, holy shit, that guy is long and strong and powerful. Second, third round pick, Terrell Burgess, one of my favorite safeties from the Pac-12, also kind of a hybrid nickel guy too. Round 4, one round later, you get Bryson Hopkins, tight end out of Purdue, who I think was like the 6th or 7th tight end taken.
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. We'll talk about that.
Did not expect that.
Yeah.
Round 6, Jordan Fuller, in my opinion, special teams guy. I don't think he'll be playing much on defense, but I do think if he makes the team, it'll be on special teams. And then a trio of round 7 players in Clay Johnston, who I did not watch. Sam Sloman, the kicker out of Miami, of Ohio, who I also did not watch. And then Tremaine Antrim, who was right tackle at Clemson, who I almost certainly think is going to end up at guard because of his size, who didn't expect him to go in round 7, but again, solid value there. So I'll let you go one by one. EJ, first, what did you think about Cam Akers?
I think Akers is a rare case where a rookie might give a team over an upgrade who had a very skilled veteran the previous season. Like, Todd Gurley is an extremely talented runner. His health has held him back for the last 2 seasons. Akers is really skilled, again, coming out of a garbage fire offense at FSU. What is it about Florida schools, man? And not including Florida, I guess, but boy, Miami and Florida State last year really both struggled on offense. That's a similarity between Akers and DJ Dallas, but Akers the better back between the two for sure. Way more talent than he was able to show there. And at a position like running backs where rookies often excel quickly, right? They come on and they're able to pick up the playbook a little more quickly and use their natural gifts more so than like we were talking about wide receivers with the 49ers. I think we could see some really good production out of Akers. I think he can be a lead back right away. He needs to prove his leverage and power and vision as a blocker. Right now, he's more of he knows where to be, I guess. He gets in the way. And usually that rusher, is delayed on their way to the quarterback, which is what you want a running back to do. But he's big enough and strong enough that he could develop into a really good blocker if he basically drops his butt a little bit. And the running back coach will help him out with that. But as a runner, very good power, really acceleration, and his cuts for a guy his size especially are...
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Sweet feet.
We're gonna see some really good production out of Cam Akers because I like him a lot. I think there was a lot of people talking about the top 3 running backs, and he was kind of that guy who's like the the fifth Beatle, in this case, the fourth running back. He was the guy that was right there, and you always wondered, is he that good? Like, hey, if he had the line that like Jonathan Taylor had, like what would his stats look like? And the answer is a lot better. So I think Cam Akers, good pick in the second round at 52, and then Van Jefferson, 5 picks later at 57. Tremendous route runner and technician. He is going to carve folks up with his feet and understanding of leverage and setting up DBs. Now, again, this is Sean Jefferson, the former NFL receiver and now receivers coach. His kid. So, again, not terribly surprising, but speaking of surprise, he's going to surprise more than one veteran corner this year. Like,
yep,
they're going to be like, rookie, whoa.
And okay, he knows how to release like Keenan Allen, and he's only a rookie. Okay.
Yeah, Jefferson is going to get some people this year, which is cool. And I think he's going to be on the field more than many rookie wide receivers. He's the fourth best wide receiver on the roster, arguably right now, after Woods, Reynolds, and Kupp in no particular order. And I think he could take snaps from Reynolds pretty quickly. I wouldn't be surprised. And I liked Reynolds coming out of A&M. I thought he was a really good wide receiver. I think he is a decent wide receiver, and he's still got ceiling. But, boy, Van Jefferson, really polished for a guy coming out of college. Again, there's a good reason for that, but he showed that against some good quality DB talent at Senior Bowl. He routinely won on releases. He has a variety of releases. He likes to set people up. You can see it. Do a similar looking release and do something else. That's a lot of variety for a young route runner, and he is also very sharp in physically executing those. It's not just that he has a plan. His feet are really good. So while he might not be the most physically talented, if you look at his sort of explosion skills or anything else, he is a guy that gets open, and guys that get open are productive in the NFL.
There's a kid at LSU that Jefferson went against named Derek Stingley. And keep in mind, LSU has a ton of good DBs, and Derek Stingley was the best one. Like, he's going to be a top 10 pick. He was arguably a top 3 corner in the entire nation as a true freshman. Pretty insanely talented kid. Van Jefferson ate his ass up. I mean, he killed him. He used 4 different releases in 4 straight plays, and Stingley didn't know what the hell he was doing. Even Devontae Smith, for as much damage as he did against Stingley, Van beat him more often. Yeah. It was pretty insane. Like, he's such a good technician, such a good route runner. Again, he doesn't have the same kind of gas as some of the other receivers in this class, nor the size, the leaping ability, anything like that. But he's Keenan Allen. And Keenan, was a day 2 guy as well, mostly because of a knee injury. But, even Keenan wasn't like the most physically gifted dude out there, but he can run a damn route. And Van Jefferson is the exact same way. I'm huge fan of that pick. Circling back a little bit to Cam Akers, there's one kind of theme that I've seen from a lot of the offensive coaches around the league. They're all trying to find their own Taysom Hill, because they've seen what Sean Payton can do with a guy that can run and catch and throw.
I know the play you're talking about.
But Florida State did that multiple times where they had Cam Akers as Wildcat quarterback, and it worked, and he threw, because Cam Akers played quarterback in high school, but he transitioned to running back in college, but he can still throw.
He can still really throw. He is not one of the Wildcat guys that you're like, oh, please don't throw it. Please don't throw it. Like, he looks like that guy because he's squat. He's not short. Like, he's tall for a running back, but he's built much more like a running back these days. He doesn't look, especially with his pads, like he's going to be a great thrower. But the one I'm thinking of, rolling out towards the right hash, definitely sees 3 defenders coming up to knock him off, and just casually throws a 35-yard dart.
Yeah, like, it's a dime, too.
I mean, he throws a rope, and you're like, whoa, that doesn't look like a running back throwing the ball, and it doesn't. So, yeah, that is a fun little wrinkle that I don't think probably escaped the watchful eye of Mr. McVay.
You're going to see it. I guarantee you.
Yeah.
You're going to see it down in the red zone. They're going to go Wildcat. And it's whoever doesn't do their homework is going to get caught by it. Guaranteed.
Or they could do pitch. Honestly, Goff could pitch and go the other way, and everybody's going to come up, and Cam Akers is going to throw it over their head Woods or whoever else.
100%.
And I was remiss not to mention it because he can really throw. It's not just that he does throw; he can really throw.
Yeah. God, and again, this draft I think was really, really good. Beyond Akers and Jefferson, who I think we both like. Terrell Lewis in round 3, man, he would not, if he didn't have health issues, he would not have been there around 3.
That's it for this year's health with Lewis.
Yeah.
Any other year, he goes probably end of round 1 as somewhere in the 25 to 32 range. But this year, people couldn't check on him. He's just got way too many tools to last this long, but it was injury, and we've talked multiple times in this series about injury and COVID and not being able to have rechecks and all that. So a lot of length, 6'5", ton of pop. He doesn't really look stacked because he's 6'5", but he's almost 250 pounds, so he looks long and lean, looks a little bit like a basketball player, but he is almost 250. And when he's one of those guys that when he puts those things together, whew, your breath kind of leaves you. You're like, whoa, oh my goodness. Like, he's got length, he's got burst, he has strength, and when he locks a guy out with one arm at 6'5", that guy's like 3 feet away from him. It's blistering when he puts all that together. There's just very little you can do.
And in terms of edge rushers right now, their top 2, at least slated starters, are Samson Ebukam and Leonard Floyd. I honestly believe day 1, Terrell Lewis is their best edge rusher that they have on the team. I think Floyd is a little bit more well-rounded. I think Ebukam, he can flash a little bit here and there, but in terms of size, length, power, bend, I think he's going to end up as a better pass rusher than Leonard Floyd, at least in that one department. Might not be a better run defender, might not be better in coverage, but in that one department on third down, he's going to get a lot of snaps because I think he's their best edge rusher. And you look at their interior defensive line with Brockers, Ashawn, and Donald, which is just a murderer's row. I mean, you're going to
get some opportunities for sure.
You're going to get one-on-ones, but more importantly, like working with stunts with Aaron Donald, with somebody with his kind of power, where Donald's taking the guard with him into the B gap, and you're expecting the center to get his head around and get to Lewis in time, and Lewis is just going to friggin' rock him with that power and length and slip through right up the middle. Like, he's going to get numbers. Even as a rookie, he's going to get numbers because I don't think that they have anybody better than him right now that's going to play on third down.
Yeah, you probably did because you're more the X's and O's hound than I am, but the thing that I think it was Coach Vass reposted, it was probably last week, about when you're going to run a twist, do it double.
Yeah.
Did you see that one?
Because the center can't react.
Right. So basically, for those of you listening at home, you basically take your center interior defensive lineman and your right interior defensive lineman, whatever you want to call those two, or whatever gaps you have them lined up in. You both have them basically rush hard and slant right. And you have the guy that you have playing on the extreme right end, whether that's your right defensive end, your outside linebacker, or if you're in a more 4-3 setup, your straight defensive end, come right around behind those guys. But instead of doing a single twist, it's a double. He goes 2 spots or 2 gaps over. And by the time he gets there, the interior offensive lineman is already going, well, nobody's coming, and moving, shading to the offensive lineman's left to get those 2 guys right slant. And it opens up almost like a guaranteed hole. And a guy like Lewis has the length and speed to exploit that rush particularly. He's going to be all up in the quarterback's face basically immediately, and he can finish. He's strong, he's long, he's got good burst, and that rush in particular made me think, oh, that's a Terrell Lewis special, man. There's no way. And even if the running back steps over, again, Lewis is 6'5", 250 and coming. He's going to make short work of him.
The Vikings do that a lot with Danielle Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Similar frame, similar length, similar power. Like, yeah, it's going to work. It's one of those things where it's a physics problem, and the physics problem is in their favor.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see how they use him. Not to be outdone, 20 picks later, same round 3, Terrell Burgess, safety out of Utah, who can play free safety. He can play nickel for you. Like, he plays tough against the run, excellent range, excellent zone awareness. You pair him with John Johnson and Taylor Rapp if you want to go like a 3 safety nickel, which is part of the reason why I think Jordan Fuller's never going to see the field, because there's already 3 safeties better than him on the roster. Yeah. But we'll get to him later. But Terrell Burgess, as a pure safety, I don't know if he would get snaps over Taylor Rapp. He definitely wouldn't get snaps over John Johnson. But as a kind of hybrid safety nickel, like if they want to go more towards that route of like a 2-4-5, yeah, he's going to be on the field a lot, and he's going to be really, really productive in that role.
Yeah, interesting stat came out this week. I saw a couple of different people put it up that, everybody says nickel is the new base, because it is. It's run more often than whatever the quote-unquote base defense is. But interesting stat from last year, dime was actually run more than nickel.
Yeah, it was like 20% to 18% or something like that.
So dime is the new base, right? Dime is run more than base and more than nickel. So having enough or too many, I guess you can't have too many good defensive backs is not a problem, right? You find a space, and they're going to play and play often. And Burgess is a perfect sort of role player in that new modern NFL, because he's really versatile. He's gutty, he's gritty, he's tough, he can play around the line, he's savvy. They rotated him at Utah back to 2 high free safety if you want. He's not really a single high free safety, not built like that, but they played a bunch of 2 high free safety at Utah, and he was fine with that. Definitely, I would say, more fun or more interesting, closer to the line, playing more of that strong safety or nickel role, and honestly, quite frankly, lined up at quite a few snaps at what would just be straight nickel. It's not really strong safety, and was very good there, very productive, and he will mix it up. He's physical. He and you mentioned Taylor Rapp, the current starting free safety or strong safety for the Rams, know each other from Pac-12 play. Rapp from Washington, Burgess from Utah. He can just kind of get right in Taylor Rapp's shadow, learn a lot, and he's going to be on the field, so he's going to be getting reps, which are very valuable to young players. Burgess is a really good ad for where they got him.
Yeah, I mean, again, 4 straight picks, bangers, all of them. And then Bryson Hopkins comes in round 4, and you're like, damn.
Gift basket. That is a gift basket right there.
But you look at the tight ends, because Colby Parkinson went ahead of him, which, again, no real problems with that. But there was like a run on tight ends like in round 3 and 4 that started with Parkinson. Weirdly enough, Devin Asiasi went in round 3 too ahead of him. Mm-hmm. And there was all these guys that are rolling off the board. And I when he got picked, we were on the live stream, and I was like, he was still on the board? What?
Yeah, wait.
How did that happen?
If you had gone to Vegas 2 months, just 2 months before this, or even I would say 6 weeks, if you'd gone to Vegas 6 weeks before the draft and said, I'll put money that Colby Parkinson gets picked before Bryson Hopkins, you would have gotten great odds. They'd be like,
yep, millionaire.
I will take your money, right? Because at one point in the process, actually when we were at the Senior Bowl, this was still sort of the general mindset that Hopkins was either TE1, he was certainly TE1 at the Senior Bowl, but there were people talking about Bryson Hopkins as TE1 overall. It was basically between him and Cole Kmet. And universally, he was thought of as one of probably the first 2 TEs off the board at that point. For people that say, you're crazy. No, go back and look at all the mock drafts, all the tight end rankings from 6 to 8 weeks before the draft. He wasn't outside the top 4. I don't care whose rankings you were looking at. And the fact that he fell to the Rams all the way where he did, I think it's actually, whisper, probably more in line with his actual value. I didn't really understand the Hopkins love. I'm not saying I had him going that late. I certainly didn't. It's probably a good solid round after where I think he would have been a good value. So I would say it's closer to his actual value, not his actual value. But really surprising that he was there that late for the Rams. Pick 136 in round 4. But Bryson Hopkins, we've both seen him up close. He's a really good tight end. I think he lands in a great spot. The way the Rams use their tight ends are going to mesh really nicely with his best skills, and they didn't have to overpay to go get him. They didn't pick him in round 1 or round 2. So they've got Higbee, Gerald Everett, and Hopkins. Gives them 3 sort of different skill sets. We talk about stables with wide receivers and stables with running backs. Tight ends the same way. It's like, who's your Y, who's your move. If you have an H, okay, fine. Now he's got, McVay's got 3 different guys that can do 3 different things, and it's going to be a really interesting, especially in the passing tree. That's where Hopkins is going to give him a little more value for his tight end spots. Look, he's a decent blocker. His dad was an offensive lineman in the NFL, Brad Hopkins, so he knows a little bit about blocking, but he's not a great blocker. He's what I would call kind of a solid blocker, but he's a much better receiver. So he really does slot right in between sort of Everett, who is the classic smaller, lighter, faster move tight end, and Higbee, who can move but is a bigger guy and is definitely more their classic sort of Y blocker.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is he's directly in between the 2 guys that they already have, but I think he's more well-rounded, and I think in the end he's going to end up stealing a lot of snaps, because I think if you want to go like YY for some looks, if you want to go into 12 personnel and like really lean on that zone run game, Hopkins, again, he's not a great blocker, but I think it's enough. Like, he can just get in the way and get in the way well enough to get Everett off the field. But I also think he's a better receiver, so if you want to have him as the Y, like if you're running like a, deep play action pass concepts that they like to do, like, Y over and all that kind of stuff off bootlegs, I think he can do that better than Higbee. So you're getting Everett on the field as kind of your move tight end, and then Hopkins as your better receiving option at Y. So I think he's going to end up stealing snaps from both of them for different reasons, but he's probably the most well-rounded tight end on the roster right now. And I was with you. I expected him probably go somewhere around the 3rd round. So to get him in the 4th round, all the way at pick 36, hell of a value. So again, Les Snead, pick after pick after pick, was just rolling in, and we're giving golf claps, seems like the whole draft stream to Les Snead. The first pick that I was kind of questioning a little bit was Jordan Fuller, because I don't like drafting slow safeties, but if you're projecting him solely as like a special teamer, like I could see it, but if you're a safety, weirdly enough, I think he got a little bit lucky with the school he was at, playing free safety behind Jeff Okudah and Damon Arnett, where you really don't have to do a whole lot of work, and you really don't have to be rangy, because anything outside the numbers, they're going to stop anyway. So I think he kind of lucked out, and his 4.67 speed wasn't punished as much as it would have been at some other schools. But in the NFL, guess what? It will be punished. So again, I don't think he's got the speed to be a starting safety, but I think he's smart. He's good against the run, at least for a free safety. He's good against the run. He gets in his fits on time. I think he could be a special teams contributor. Like, really, I think you're hoping for him to be like the Matthew Slater of safeties. Like, that's what you're hoping for, which can justify a 6th-round pick. But as a pure safety, I don't really expect anything.
Yeah, Fuller's maybe a little miscast as a straight free safety. Well, definitely miscast as a straight free safety. But another guy that caught my eye in movement drills for DBs at the Combine, hadn't paid a lot of attention to Fuller because, look, I paid a lot more attention to his teammates. But he's got good size, 6'2", 205, and he's a fluid mover. He really does have good feet. Now, what he doesn't have is a ton of explosion, and his 4.67 40 stock sunk him in terms of draft value. But this is a guy that was a captain, a 3-year starting single high safety at Ohio State, first team All Big Ten as a senior, who goes late in the draft. Now, we just talked about dime is the new base, right? So you're going to be playing, 6 DBs. There's a role for Fuller. Now, is it, singling up and going deep against speed threats? It better not be, not if you want your team to survive. But Can you play a guy? Like you said, he's good against the run. He's got good size, 6'2", 205. That's only, 15 pounds off a lot of starting outside linebackers who 4.6 would look pretty good for, right? So you can put him in as that dime backer, as that heavy near the line. Do I think he's going to be displacing, again, any of the Rams starting safeties? I don't. But if you need a guy that can run, maybe match up versus a tight end, again, he's got length and he's fluid in the short areas. I could see a role for him. Do I think he's going to get there right away? No, but again, you're getting a smart guy, captain at Ohio State, right? First team All Big Ten. And you get him because his explosion scores weren't great. And look, his 40's not great, but against tight ends, we just talked about, hey, 4.66 was the second fastest tight end in this year's draft class. He ran 4.67. Fuller ran 4.67. So he's literally as fast as the second fastest tight end in this year's draft class. There's a role for that.
Here's
guy.
a question for you. It just occurred to me since you mentioned, not using him how he was used in college, and at least not exposing him to his weaknesses.
Not if you're
also
smart.
Not if you're smart. You also mentioned his size, and again, good player against the run, really good at getting into his fits. 6'2", 205 is on the bigger end for a modern day safety. Who did they just lose? Corey Littleton.
Yeah. I mean, I could
add
see
10
some
pounds.
of it. Yeah, Littleton is bigger.
No, he's bigger, but you add 10 pounds and you solely, and I mean solely, play him as dime linebacker on third down.
Yeah.
Which we see some teams do it. Like the Cowboys do that with Jordan Lewis. They play Jordan Lewis sometimes as dime linebacker against like scat backs. When like they know they're going to pass, and it's like let's just get a guy that can match up with those kinds of threats because we know for damn sure he's not going to match up against the Will Fullers of the world.
Yeah.
Maybe you put on some weight and he can do that.
Yep.
And maybe that's what they're expecting of him. I don't know how they're going to use him. That is one way that I would be comfortable using him. But the way that he was used at Ohio State, absolutely not.
Not in the pros, no
never,
way.
Never, ever, ever.
But again, if you've got that kind of guy, you got a smart guy. He understands. He's very experienced in a Power 5 conference. He's got good size, which you can't teach. And he does have good feet. He moves. That was the thing that caught my eye at the combine. Look, you're getting this guy pick 6, or round 6, pick 199. If the experiment doesn't work and he doesn't become Corey Littleton 2.0 or whatever they want to use him as dime back or third down specialist, like who cares? He's a 6th round pick. You're gonna get some special teams value out of him, but if it does work, you're genius.
Yeah, it's true. And especially after the first 5 picks,
Oh yeah, you're playing with
Snead's
house money.
Playing with, he took the words right out of my mouth.
Yep.
Playing with house money. I did not happen to watch Clay Johnston, their 7th round pick, the linebacker out of Baylor.
Nope.
I know you. Yeah, okay. So we're in agreement of we have no idea. We'll see. And then I clearly didn't watch Sam Sloman either because I don't know what I'm looking at when it comes to kickers.
I think we need a sticker. I think we need a bootleg sticker. We don't watch kickers.
We don't watch kickers. We leave all that to Pat McAfee to comment on.
That's right.
I did watch Tremaine Antrim though.
Yep, me too.
Antrim, is it Antrim or Ankrum?
I think it's Antrim, but
Antrim. Okay.
I don't quote me on that because I'm clearly the guy on the podcast that butchers more names or juxtaposes last names on players. So let's not count on me for those two things.
The first game that I watched of him, I threw on Ohio State. I was like, all right, let me see this guy against Chase Young. Mm-hmm. Like, let's just see. And yeah, there was you question the size, you question the length. Young certainly had an easier time with him than who's their left tackle? Shit.
I guarantee his last name is not shit.
Oh God, this is gonna bother me, especially because I literally have talked to him before. Why am I totally blanking on this? Anyway, the Clemson left tackle is going to be a decently high pick next year. He's a really, really good player. Good chance he'll be like one of the first 3 tackles taken.
I can't wait for the comments on YouTube.
I know. I totally apologize that I'm blanking on his name. There's so many tackles to look at. Good player, good kid. I've talked to him multiple times. Great guy. But Antrim specifically, God, this is a whole mess. I'm so sorry, Clemson fans, if you're listening to this. He survived against Chase Young. He got beat a couple times, but he hung in there. And again, he's not super big, not super long. But when he gets his hands on you, it's very similar to Simpson, the guard that came out of Clemson this year. When he gets his hands on you, he latches and he's really hard to get off. So I think you move him into guard, where I think his movement skills and his natural upper body strength can help him out a lot, and his length and just lack of overall size won't be punished as much by really long and explosive pass rushers like Chase Young. you really kind of leave him in a phone booth and let him just fight. I think he fits there. This is one of those rare like 7th round picks that I do expect to make the roster, and he really fits McVay's offense too, because I think he's a decently good lateral mover in the run game too. So again, big fan of that pick. I think it was a great value, and I think he's going to make the 53.
Yeah, Rams got a steal here. Look, when you're talking about the 7th and anybody that's going to stick and could play meaningful snaps even within a year or two.
Jackson Carman, that's his name.
There you go.
Fuck. There we go. Okay, continue. Sorry.
No, I know how good it feels to actually remember those things, so I'm glad you did. He's on the short side, Antrim. Arms too, but he's got good feet, solid power. He is going to have to get used to the monsters who play interior defensive line in the NFL. But I think he's going to be a very solid swing interior offensive line player pretty quickly with his skills. Look, very experienced player from the ACC. You get a guy like that in the 7th, like he's well worth that pick. And I think you're right. I think he probably doesn't get kicked off the roster and probably even hangs around as an NFL player for quite a while because he's a skilled guy. He definitely maps better to guard in the pros, but tackle experience isn't going to hurt him at all. It's nice to have that understanding of what the guy to your right is actually trying to accomplish. So I was, again, it's just a cherry on top of what was a very, very solid draft for the Rams.
Yeah, I honestly, I think they probably had the best class in the division if I was going to pick one. And then it's kind of a tie for the second place, but I truly think Les Snead knocked this one out of the park. And if you're including Jalen Ramsey in their overall draft haul, hell of a job. I think this is exactly the kind of class they needed for a bounce back season. Hopefully we have a season, but it was exactly what they needed to replenish depth. To kind of fill in some holes that they need to really get back into this thing in the NFC West, which is a brutal division. So overall, great job by Les Snead. And that brings us to our last team, the Arizona Cardinals, who
we stood next to in the bleachers.
That was actually first day. We're all freezing our asses off.
That was crazy.
We've told our Cliff Kingsbury, Steve Keim story before, but they're a good group. I really like what the Cardinals are building there. I think they have some foundational pieces, especially Kyler Murray, who I think is going to be a stud for a long time. Great young quarterback. And I love Cliff Kingsbury as a coach. I think Steve Keim is a good general manager overall. But I will say their current roster, and you brought this up with me before the show, it's not deep at all. They kind of remind me of the Texans of like 5 or 6 years ago, where your perception of the overall depth of the roster is not accurate because of the star power they have. But beyond the star power, Kyler, Hopkins, Buddha, Patrick Peterson, Chandler Jones, like they're starting 22, at least most of their starting 22 is really good. It's when they start taking like 2 injuries, like they can't afford to lose more than 2 guys. And if they lose the wrong 2 guys, if they lose Chandler and they lose Buddha, their defense is terrible. If they lose Kyler, it's over. They don't have a good backup quarterback. If they lose Hopkins, they're in trouble because as much as we love Larry and as much as we love Texas A&M kid they drafted a few years ago, Christian Kirk, none of them are DeAndre Hopkins, and it's not even close at this point. Like prime Larry, yeah, sure, but prime Larry left a long time ago. So like they are ultra thin. They're going to win some games. In fact, I'd venture to bet they're going to be over 500. And probably challenge for a wild card. But if they start taking injuries, they are screwed because they are razor thin.
Yeah, you start going through this roster, and now, look, this is the last team in the last draft recap podcast. So we have looked at literally every player in the NFL. We've looked at every roster in the NFL as it stands at this point. And the thing that struck me about the Arizona roster as I looked through it is, again, I had that shine about their roster. It's like, man, they got some good young talent. They got Chandler Jones on defense. They got Patrick Peterson. They got Buddha. Oh, yeah, this is a great roster. And as you really dig in, which is what we're doing here, we're looking into the dark corners of their roster. And there's a couple areas that are pretty darn good. Wide receiver, very solid. Running back, decent, right? I think Kenyon Drake gives them an option that's going to work really well in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. Talk about Kyler, but you look behind Kyler and you're like, oh man, if Kyler goes down, they're they're completely screwed. They don't have anybody at backup quarterback, right? They got Brett Hundley and another guy who, I don't even remember scouting him, right?
Drew Anderson, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. You look at their offensive line, and like their best is DJ Humphrey, and then you're like, who's the other tackle? And that's not, that might be common for the average NFL fan. It's not common for Brett and I to go, who's the other? Because he was like, oh, it's this guy. And I was like, actually, that's not the guy that starts for them. He's like, really? I thought
it was Marcus Gilbert, but it was Justin Murray.
Yeah.
Which,
and, as you look at a roster like that, you start to go, hey, there's this really thin, shiny veneer at the top. And let's not take away from that. Kyler's really good. Buda Baker's really good. Chandler Jones is amazing. One of the most underrated players in the NFL. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins, great wide receiver. But if you take like 5 guys off the top, that roster does not have anywhere near the depth or development potential that most of these other rosters, as we're looking through. I had the alternate experience. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that guy. I really liked him coming out. Now, maybe he hasn't done anything in the NFL, but that guy's got potential. That guy could grow into a role. Oh yeah, that guy's a really good swing backup. I can't believe he's not seeing the field. It's not like that with Arizona. It's the opposite, right? You go through and you're like, who? What? That's all they've got?
You know who they are?
Who?
They're the bizarro Buffalo Bills. Because Buffalo has a million dudes that are just good football players.
And have been assembled over the last few years.
Yeah.
Really largely over the last 3 years. So I'll give you that, but it just, in having looked at every roster now in the NFL, I really came away from the Arizona roster going, man, A, they better not get hurt. And B, even if they don't, it's pretty rough in spots. Like outside linebacker is the one that really comes down to it right now. They've got Isaiah Simmons, the top pick we're going to talk about, slated as an inside linebacker, and that's actually where I said I thought he'd probably play best in our much early pre-draft talk about Isaiah Simmons that you actually posted on the film room. But you look at outside linebacker and like, okay, Chandler Jones, awesome. The other guys are Vontarius Dora from Louisiana Tech, Kylie Fitz from Utah, a former Bear who didn't stick with them, Devon Kennard from USC, and Hassan Reddick, who was a big name. Everybody's like, Hassan Reddick, who hasn't really done anything with them, from Temple. And then Reggie Walker from Kansas State. Now, if you could have named any of those guys besides Reddick, just because of his name recognition and that he was a first-round pick, I would have been pretty impressed. The chances that any of those guys are going to do anything at the outside linebacker spot, because Chandler Jones was this team on defense, and we don't need to get sidetracked in the weeds on that. But it's representative of the rest of the Arizona roster. Keim has put together a sort of high talent sheen on the top, and boy, everything that sits behind it, besides like defensive back, they're pretty good, and wide receiver, they're pretty good. Like tight end, offensive line, defensive line, like not outside linebacker, but defensive line, no. Running back behind Kenyon Drake, no.
I will say though that this draft, I feel like if there's one thing that it did, it was improve their depth in some key areas, particularly
defensive line for sure,
particularly front seven. And I'll just kind of roll through it because it was mostly defense. So they had 6 total picks. Round 1, they had Isaiah Simmons. Then they didn't have another pick because they traded their second-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins. Womp womp. Round 3, they came back and got Josh Jones, who never in a million years I thought would be there, but he was. Great pick for them.
Yeah.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the season he's their best offensive lineman. And then round 4, they doubled up on defensive tackle, which they desperately needed some depth. So they got Lecky Fotu and Rashard Lawrence. Round 6, they got one of your favorites in Evan Weaver to give them some linebacker depth behind Simmons and Hicks, who I assume was going to be their 2 starters. And then round 7, they picked up Eno Benjamin, who is one of my favorite day 3 values of any team, who I think is going to get significant snaps rotating with Kenyon Drake. So I think every single one of their picks was both necessary and on value. I'll start with Isaiah Simmons. He's not a safety to me. He's not a nickel to me. He's not an edge rusher to me. He's an inside linebacker. They cut a lot of flack for saying we're going to start him an inside linebacker and maybe expand out in future years. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to stick at inside linebacker because that's where he's best. He doesn't quite have the feet or the hips to play nickel. I think he's got range to play free safety. Like, he's super fast, but I think it's wasted. I think you really want him as close to the ball as possible. So I would leave him down low towards the line of scrimmage. And I would really want him more to be a run and chase player from the middle of the field than coming off the edge. So, overall to me, I think his best spot is inside linebacker. I think he'll make the most impact at inside linebacker. He's got good instincts, unbelievable range. I think he's got the length to get off blocks. And I think you can use him almost like honestly, like a supercharged version of Shaq Thompson, if I was going to have like a comp there, but potentially like better than Shaq Thompson. So I really, really am comfortable with that fit. I don't want them to move him around. I don't want them to overload him as a rookie. Learn this one spot. Maybe we can talk about throwing in some extra roles in certain packages down the line. But for now, keep him at linebacker. He's going to be excellent there. And while I was in favor of prioritizing offensive line in the first round, the fact that they got away with getting Isaiah Simmons and a good offensive lineman in the third round, I think they really did an excellent job there.
Yeah, if they didn't bookend it with Josh Jones, it would have been more widely panned as a move. But there were a lot of teams that were afraid to do this, notably the Panthers, who came out after the draft and said, we just weren't really comfortable with what we might be able to do with him. We think some other teams might be able to do it better, which was like, huh? It was an odd statement to make, but it's true. Arizona said, sure, we'll do it. You don't want to do it, we'll do it. And, we talked a lot about Isaiah Simmons. We don't need to go into that. Folks can go back and find that discussion if they want to. But yeah, we basically said keep him close to the line and keep him somewhere in the middle and use that range. And I kind of want to work this almost inside out or backwards. Let's go down to round 4 and look at Leki Fotu and Rashard Lawrence, two walls in the middle. These guys are massive space eaters. So Leki Fotu from Utah, just a powerhouse, 330, really, really strong. And Rashard Lawrence, captain, defensive tackle off the LSU team, who is very much a run plugger with some dynamism. He's got a little bit more than that. Reminds me of a little bit of a guy like Eddie Goldman, who's very stout against the run, but occasionally flashes through and, hey, he's got more, maybe a step more than you thought he did. But basically, you put Twin Towers in front of your new toy, right? You say to those guys, keep Isaiah Simmons clean. And it reminds me a little bit of what the Bears did in front of Brian Urlacher, who is not a comparison player overall to Isaiah Simmons, but has some similar traits in terms of size and speed and the ability to get down the middle of the field and run with people. And what they did to keep Urlacher clean was bring in Ted Washington and Keith Traylor and say, basically keep 54 clean and let him be a run and hit linebacker. Now, look, Urlacher could take on blocks and shed him on his own. He was 260, but sure better if he gets a clean shot, right? So just lets him maximize his gifts. And this setup, the way they drafted and with the initial plan of where they've got Simmons listed, reminds me a little bit of that. Put two really stout guys in the middle, make it really hard to get to Simmons, and then let Simmons use all that speed and range and have a free run at the ball.
And not to mention, I think Hicks is an underrated run defender. Buda's an underrated run defender. Like, Buda's so good out on the edge. Nothing's getting outside of him anyway. And so I think they're really setting up Isaiah Simmons to be a tackle machine.
Yep, middle triangle.
He is the great eraser. And not to mention on third down, the fact that he can cover running backs, he can cover tight ends. You're not going to be able to box him out because of his size and length. You're not going to be able to outquick him, like, unless your name's Christian McCaffrey. Like, it's a short list of running backs that I think can beat him in space. So I again, with what they're building around him, it's not just the fit at position, it's what they're surrounding him with to maximize that fit. They're doing an excellent job with that. And we've mentioned Josh Jones several times now. He was one of the more technically proficient tackles in this class. We talk about pass rushers rushing with a plan. He protected with a plan. Very, very good at what's called independent hand placement in terms of knowing when to punch with the inside hand, knowing when to punch with the outside hand, always having high hand, low hand placement so you're not, too high or too low. You always have one of each, so it's really hard to counter. If you neutralize his hands, he was good at resetting. He had good feet. I mean, just really, really, really strong technician. Not the most explosive guy, not the biggest guy, not the longest guy, but we've seen tackles of his dimension that have really good technique thrive before. And I think he's going to be another one. And that's why, again, I think he'll be even better than DJ Humphries, even though he's a third-round pick. And DJ Humphries was probably their best offensive lineman last year. So I think by default, Josh Jones is going to end up being their best offensive lineman by the end of this year. And, man, they were sure lucky that he was there in round 3, because if they picked a linebacker in round 1 and then didn't get a starting tackle out of it in round 3, they were going to be in trouble.
Yeah, they would have got a lot more flack for it. So again, lucky that Josh Jones was there. Like you said, Jones, one of those guys who was just outside the top 4 offensive tackles. And the top 4 offensive tackles in this draft are really good, and he was kind of like that 4.5. One of the things I will say about Josh Jones in terms of size was that guy is the most cut offensive tackle I've ever seen. Like,
he's like Tyron Smith in terms of like body fat. Like, I don't know what his body fat is, but like,
yeah, when he
dude's got a 6-pack.
Yeah, when he walked across the stage at weigh-ins at the Senior Bowl, which is an odd event to start with, I was like, who? They had to screw the card up. Like, usually offensive linemen are a little bit round, like they're trying to keep weight on, right? They're eating 5,000 calorie lunches. You know, that's a thing with offensive linemen, and there are guys that are in shape, but they're not cut. And like Josh Jones, at his size, which is over 300 pounds, was cut. And I was like, are you serious? Like, that's Josh Jones? Because, you know, he doesn't have a jersey on. And I was like, no, that is, like, he is in ridiculously good shape. He is very strong, very technically proficient for all the reasons you mentioned in terms of both hand and foot placement and working those together, what we call marrying your top and bottom half. So I think he starts certainly at one of those tackle spots at the latest by the end of the year, as long as he's healthy. I can't see, literally it's DJ Humphries and Justin Murray in front of him. It's like,
yeah,
like
he's gonna get.
He's better than one of them, for sure. Yeah. And the cool thing is, if he earns that, which we both think he will, Kyler Murray gets a good young tackle who he gets to get used to protecting one of his edges for a while. Like, Murray's only got 1 year of service. You get a good young tackle, and they get used to each other. It's a bit like a pitcher and a catcher getting used to each other, right? There's some unspoken communication about at what point are you going to let people go? Are you going to push them wide? All that stuff is sort of unspoken language between quarterbacks and their offensive tackles, and he gets to sort of start that groove with Josh Jones, and they could be together for quite a while.
Yeah, 100%. I know one of your favorite picks, probably in this whole draft, was the Cardinals in round 6. They took Evan Weaver, your guy out of Cal. He is the polar opposite of Isaiah Simmons in almost every way. But
yeah, I mean, I can see that for sure.
Athletically speaking.
Yeah, he's no Isaiah Simmons. Let's put it that way.
But instinctually,
yeah, I would say they're 6 and 7 were 2 of my favorite picks in the whole draft, because those guys are guys that I stand for really, really hard. But Weaver's really interesting. He's better than his testing numbers indicate. He's not completely rangy in space as a cover guy. He is not your true sideline to sideline linebacker, but I think he takes more crap for that than he really deserves. He has better range than people give him credit for. People are like, no, he's a 2-down linebacker. He's only between the tackles. He's only a go-forward guy. And I was like, not if you look at his tape, right? He's got better range than that, but he is not a fluid sideline to sideline guy. He is one of the best tacklers in the draft. Very, very physical in short zone coverage. He will give it to you and knows how to deliver impact when he arrives. The folks that know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about here. Some people tackle people. Some people are, grab and drag. Some people deliver a shot when they show up, and that's Weaver. He loves it, and he's very good at it. It's not that he is a hitter and not a tackler. He is both, and that's pretty rare in college football these days, to find a guy that raps very, very well and also ends up putting people on their back. Very good forward burst, surprising forward burst, good on things like a rolling blitz. Not good as a pure rusher, but on the rolling blitz, he was more effective than I thought a lot of people thought he was. good forward burst, but that lateral agility is a little bit limited. Very smart player, though, so he puts himself in the right spots mentally, which makes him look a lot faster than he is, and he gets off blocks very well. He loves being able to lock a guy out with one arm, leave that other arm open, and make himself what I call available, which is open to hitting people. One thing he struggled with in college, and he will struggle again with it specifically in the pros, is mobile quarterbacks. Like truly mobile quarterbacks, he just can't hang. So, yeah, that's one limitation. But again, this is a guy you're getting down the board, smart starter, led all of the SBS in tackles with 159 last year. This guy knows how to get it done, and he is a middle run eraser. Like if Isaiah Simmons becomes the tackler that Evan Weaver is, forget it. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Right? Like Weaver is so good at shutting down that interior run game. Basically draw that triangle from the middle linebacker spot out just past, I would say, the numbers. Anything in that zone, he is coming for. He is a vacuum.
Well, you look at the division that they're in. It's Kyle Shanahan. It's the Seahawks. It's Sean McVay. They're going to get run on a lot. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what the score is. Like, these teams run on 3rd and 7 for fun. Like, that's just what this division is. They run the damn football. So I think you draft Evan Weaver to give yourself a little bit of depth, and that's kind of the theme of this draft class is protection from your starters getting hurt because they were so razor thin. Last year, if Hicks wasn't on the field, their run defense was terrible because they didn't have anybody else. Now, I think Simmons is a tackle machine. Evan Weaver's an even bigger tackle machine. Now you have a little bit of protection where if you lose Hicks again, I think you're fine.
Yeah.
And that alone
better,
justifies the pick.
Yeah, better for sure. So, and then the guy, we both love this guy for different reasons. We watched him at different times. But Eno. I love Eno Benjamin. I crave running back tape. Folks that follow me know that I save my running backs like candy for the end, and then I do this huge blowout like Halloween where you eat the whole bag and maybe steal a little bit of your sister's too. I end up doing like 23, 25 running backs every year because I just love watching the tape, and I use it as my carrot to get to the end of the process. Eno was my find this year. I put find in quotes. That was a back that I knew something about, was familiar with him. But when I did my full study, it really blew me away with the completeness of his game. Good receiver, nice burst, really nice feet, drive to finish runs. Patient, makes the most out of nothing better than most mid-tier backs in this class. He's got jukes, spins, cutbacks, slash cuts, and he'll use them all, and he links them together more often than most guys do. And he always seems to, at the end of that run, twist, contort, extend, get every little last bit and squeeze every little last yard he can out of the run. Just such a fun running back to watch because he's got so many tools, and almost all of them are good or better than average. When I was talking about pass rushers at the top of the show, I was saying I'm looking for that one trait that they do really well. Same thing with running backs, but you say, oh, he's got that one good spin move, but his cuts aren't so great or his catching isn't so great. Like all of Eno's skills are good or better than average. And that's really rare. He's going to be so useful, and I agree with you completely that he's going to get a bunch of snaps. Even if Kenyon Drake is their lead guy, Eno's going to earn some because he just makes yards. If he's got a negative, he's a decent cut blocker, but he really needs some technique, tune-up, stand-up, pass pro. He knows where to be, but he has this really weird trait, and Arizona fans, look out for this. He doesn't use his hands when a guy blitzes. He just bodies him.
and his balance through contact when he's blocking is unreal. He is so scrappy as a pass protector, and you see that in the one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl, where we're watching these linebackers that got 20 pounds on him I mean, just go barreling into him, and you would think that physics would take over and he'd go flat on his ass, but he stays up. I don't know how, but he stayed up.
Yeah, and the weird thing is he's hitting him with his body, like his chest, his core.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, that's not how you do that, right? You get your hands up and use them like a shock absorber, but he doesn't. So if he gets that, that'll be great. That's certainly a key to him getting on the field, but you'll love this, and this is a great way to close out the series and the show and everything. The last note in my report about Eno Benjamin, who is the last player we're going to talk about, is basically an affordable Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I was just going to bring up Clyde Edwards. I was going to ask you.
There it is.
I was going to ask you. Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round or Eno Benjamin in the seventh? We love CEH. Favorite running back in the class.
Yeah, it's not even close. Like, I'd take him in seventh because, again, we just talked about running backs being fungible, and Eno is so much better than people give him credit for. If you can get that guy in the fifth or the sixth or the seventh, just from a value perspective, it means you can do something else with your first-round pick. Nothing against Clyde. We both love him to death and have spoken at length about how much of a favorite he is of ours. But Eno is easily 85% of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Easily.
I mean, you look at even just a linebacker, like, because, they took a linebacker in the first round. Let's just say a linebacker that went in the range of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Patrick Queen was like 4 picks earlier. Mm-hmm. Would you rather have Patrick Queen and Eno Benjamin, or would you rather have Clyde Edwards-Helaire and, I don't know, pick a 7th-round linebacker? Yeah. Like, even Evan Weaver, I'll give you a 6th-round linebacker. Yeah. It's not close.
No, the balance there is not good. And we can talk all day about team building, and we basically have because we're almost at 2 hours now. But love Eno Benjamin. For all you folks out there that are asking us to do a fantasy sort of sleepers podcast, like, grab Eno Benjamin. Just even if you don't own Kenyon Drake, just grab Eno Benjamin. He's going to get some snaps anyways. Might steal some touchdowns. You never know. That offense is going to be very unpredictable with Cliff running it. But Eno has talent, and talent tends to shine through at the running back position. If he gets a break, whether it's this year or next year, like, people are going to be like, this Eno Benjamin kid, I had no idea. And you're going to say, nope, I listened to Bootleg. I absolutely knew that Eno was a stud well before most. So, yeah. Anyways, that's a hell of a series. We went through the entire NFL, man.
Yeah, and I feel like I didn't make enough drinks to properly enjoy. I mean, that was a lot. That was a lot of hours. I mean, we're talking like, what, 16 hours, something like that?
Getting close, probably. Content. Yeah, about 14. We did 17 for the live stream, so it seems to be our average.
True. That's about right. So, hell of a series. I can't wait for, God, what is it, 3 months from now that we're going to have to start doing the next one? Because it seemed like we took so long to do this one. But
I think we might give ourselves, a bigger break. But for me, it was great. We got to go through, again, every roster, have now seen every player, every position group in the NFL. You kind of get to rank them, one versus the other. I talked about path to playing time for these rookies and what we can kind of expect from them. So for me, it feels like I'm more prepared to go into whatever we get for a season than I probably ever have been, because I have never done that much comprehensive work top to bottom in the league. Maybe a division, certainly on a team, but never for all the teams. And that feels really good. So it was worthwhile. Hope you guys enjoyed them. I know a lot of people said they're just sort of bookmarking them like a library to bring back out when they have to do fantasy drafts. Hey, good on you. However you want to use them, however you want to share them. Keep them from your teammates or your league mates maybe in fantasy, but share them with your family that you don't play against or something like that.
By the way, I just had my dynasty draft and my first 3 picks because I was super light on running backs. I went Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson, Eno Benjamin back to back to back. So I'm feeling pretty good about it.
You got some fun stuff in there. But thanks so much for hanging with us. We really appreciate it. We are not done with content. We are not packing it in for the rest of the summer. Heck, we're still in quarantine like probably most of the rest of you guys. And we've got stuff lined up. We have we get to play now. This was a great idea that maybe was a little bit more to bite off than either one of us was thinking about, but we're freed up now, and we have some ideas about some interviews, some guests, some interesting little deep dives that we want to take. So hang with us, look for more new content. Should be coming out almost weekly. Of course, we can't guarantee that because, well, we're us. But we'll get it out to you as quickly as we can. Thanks so much for listening. Really appreciate it, and we will talk to you soon.
Later.